Welcome back to Squawk Box. The March unemployment or employment report, I should say, showing a loss, though it is an unemployment report right now, of 701,000 jobs last month. But because the data was collected in the middle of March, we know it still doesn't capture the true impact of all the coronavirus-related layoffs so far. Joining us right now to talk about jobs, the government's $2 trillion relief package, and what may come next is Jack Lew. He's, of course, the former Treasury Secretary of the United States. Good morning to you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for joining us. First, on the jobs numbers, where do you think we are and how bad do you think it gets?
Well, good morning, Andrew. Good to see that you're all well. I think if you look at the jobs numbers, there should be no surprise that they're showing an increase, and if anything, it understates with the impact. It's clear that when you shut the economy down, tens of millions, 10 million people are applying for unemployment, out of work, looking for the future. The question, I think, is not to overreact to these numbers, which are pretty much what we expected, whether they're a little above or below expectations. And to think about what are we doing to make sure that people have what they need while they're unemployed or while they're out of work, and how do we make sure that the economy can be turned back on as quickly as possible. That recovery is going to be the thing that determines where the economy goes in the future. And I think that when you're looking at a recession that's caused by a public health crisis, everything is driven by the health issues. What we can do as a matter of policy is make sure that we maximize the chance that we come out of this as quickly as possible.
Okay, well, then let me ask you about those policies, including this $2 trillion package that's been put together. Today, of course, the small business loan program is supposed to begin in earnest, though we're obviously hearing some questions and concerns about how quickly it's going to roll out. Some banks still trying to go over the information in terms of how it's put together. Your assessment of that program and whether you think it's going to be enough.
Well, first of all, we have to embrace the enormity of the undertaking. We're talking about a volume of activity that we've never seen out of the Small Business Administration. We've never seen out of the lenders who participate in it. So the execution of this is absolutely critical to the success. Let's remember the goal here. The goal here is to make sure that people have money to live on while the economy is shut down, and that businesses are still there to turn on the lights when we get through this. That means that we have to suspend some of the normal considerations, which frankly were central to my policy considerations for the 3 decades I was in government. Usually you ask a lot of questions about efficiency. You ask a lot of questions about false payments. You ask a lot of questions about moral hazard. That's not really the concern here. The concern here is getting money out quickly, getting businesses and people through the moment. Now, when you look at what is being rolled out, it's a little bit of a contradiction. On the one hand, there's 100% federal guarantee, so banks have no credit risk. On the other hand, they are going to have to underwrite these loans, and I hope that the rules make it clear that there won't be micromanagement, so that if there's some false piece of information that a bank didn't know, they have to worry about their exposure on that. The reality is it's okay to make some mistakes here if we get most of the money out to the right place. The challenge here is not to get it perfect. It's to get it out and to be close. I think that's very different from the largest businesses where there's a proper concern for very, very detailed oversight because of, A, the amounts involved, and quite frankly, the resources that those businesses have to get through this crisis, whether or not the government assistance is there. For these small businesses, it's a matter of life or death. And if they can't turn on the lights, then you don't get people back to work and you don't have a quick recovery.
So what are you suggesting as it relates to big businesses?
So, look, I think on big businesses, there needed to be a response. I'm not critical that there was a response. I think that the debate in Congress, which frankly slowed down consideration for a couple of days, was on how to provide a degree of oversight and reasonable conditions. I think the conditions that they put on the big businesses are right. There shouldn't be dividends or stock buybacks or big employee, executive compensation packages. I think the question of who gets the loans, how the decisions are made, transparency is critical. I think it's very unfortunate that there's now a growing divide over whether or not that oversight will be allowed to work. we are not done dealing with the problems created by the health crisis. There's going to be a need for trust. If there is not clear oversight, and if the administration, through signing statements and criticizing congressional attempts to have meaningful oversight, undermines that agreement on this very important bill, it will make it much harder to deal with what needs to be done next.
Let me ask you a broader question, Mr. Secretary, and we only have a minute. Long term, how do you think this changes politics, and how do you think it changes the politics of business? For so long, the world of business has looked for lower tax rates. We've all had conversations about whether we should have higher taxes or lower taxes. Obviously, all of that's gotten pushed down. And yet here we are again in a situation where the government is effectively providing insurance for everybody. They've done it now this time, and we had this 10 years ago. You could argue we had this after 9/11.
I think this is very different from 10 years ago. The small businesses that are closing, and even most of the large businesses that are suffering, had nothing to do with the crisis. Some of them were in weaker condition going in, and there are legitimate questions for big businesses that did big stock buybacks, how much their equity holders should pay. This is a question of a health crisis, giving time for the health crisis to pass and being able to turn the economy back on. It's singular in my experience. It's not like anything else.